Welcome to the monthly webinar here for November of 2018. And I thought I'd take the opportunity to give all of you a bit of a recap of Wi-Fi Trek 2018. So we'll cover some information about Wi-Fi Trek and what went on there, some of the things we learned and so forth. And always, you can find us on Twitter at CWNP and at Carpenter Tom, and on YouTube, CWNP TV. This webinar will be archived on our YouTube channel, CWNP TV, within a day or so of the broadcast. So welcome, glad to have you with me, and we're going to jump right in. Now, first of all, the agenda for today, we're going to talk about the CWNP announcements that were made at Wi-Fi Trek. In case you haven't heard them yet through social media or other buzz feeds, we will give you that information here in the webinar. Then I'll give you some technical insights. I'll basically go through all of the different presenters and give you one little nugget of something that they delivered to us at the conference. So give you some insights, maybe a little commentary there as well. And then I'll let you know what's next, what's coming up for CWNP in the coming year of 2019. So first of all, CWNP announcements. We announced the CWSP exam update is coming in 2019. So we will be releasing a new version of CWSP next year, and I will let you know the dates when those exams will go live and so forth toward the end of this presentation. There's also a completely new exam that was announced, the Certified Wireless Integration Professional, CWIP. And this is really addressing several things that are emerging in the market, that are gaining in popularity, and that are potential gaps in some of the existing certifications so that we can make sure that we are giving our community the knowledge they need to really work with Wi-Fi today. So we'll be covering topics related to IoT, Bluetooth Low Energy, LTE 5G, wired network integration, and management of the RF domain with multiple technologies. So for example, how do you deal with potential interference issues if you're using Zigbee and Wi-Fi in the same space, things like that. So it will be covering integration. That's really the focus. Wi-Fi integrating with other networks. And there may even be some scripting that makes its way into it, automation type concepts to be able to automate, because really Wi-Fi is the RF, it's the wireless communications, it's where the 802.11 protocol happens. But we often integrate that with management systems that give us some automation and so forth. So that kind of integration may well be covered as well. The exact things covered in the CWIP certification will be determined after the JTA, the Job Task Analysis. So that's going to take place, as I'll tell you more about later on, first quarter of next year. And when that is completed, then we will know more details. And so we'll release the objectives as soon as they're done. I expect the objectives to be finalized in the first quarter of next year. And that way they'll be available for you to view at the website, even though the exam will not go live for several months after that. But it'll let you know what that certification is going to be all about. By the way, the same is true for CWSP. So CWSP has been around for about 15 years or so now, but the new version of CWSP will no doubt cover some new things. Certainly it'll cover WPA3, for example, and there may be other things as well. So we'll make sure that those objectives also are available first quarter so you can begin reviewing and understanding what the new exam might cover. An additional announcement that we made at the conference was that CWNE.com is going to go live as a website. Now, CWNE.com has been a domain owned by CWNP for many, many years. And for many years, it was used only for email addresses for CWNEs when they wanted them, back in the day when those were actually offered to CWNEs. What we're doing now is we're taking that domain name and we're using it for two things. Phase one is CWNE application processing. So as people apply for their CWNE, they'll be able to do so at CWNE.com. There will be, of course, a link from the CWNE certification page at CWNP to take them there, but it will be a forms-based automated application process. And the beauty of it is not only will they be applying there, but they'll be able to review their application, see the progress it's made, where it's at in the process, and it'll be a communication channel for feedback and so forth related to the application. So we're very excited about launching that. That's the phase one part. Phase two will be CWNP community building in general. So CWNEs specifically will have the opportunity to blog there, to post there in different ways if they want to, and really support the community. But additionally, there will be forums. So our forums from CWNP.com will move over there. They'll become far more active, and it will be an opportunity and a place to build active community and relationships. And, specifically, a lot of people have said over the last 2 to 3 years that they'd really like to be able to network with CWNEs more while they're on their journey to becoming a CWNE. So it will provide that opportunity as well. So there will be the option for a CWNE, for example, to say that they're willing to mentor other people. And the way it'll work is similar to the way it works at LinkedIn, if you're familiar with that. So I know about 18 months ago or so, LinkedIn contacted me. Just an automated email, of course, not that I was a special point of contact, but they contacted me saying, would you be willing to give professional advice to people? And I said, sure. And now I may get a message through LinkedIn once every month or so with a question from somebody, and I answer the questions and give them professional advice. So I found that to be an interesting way to give back to the community, and we want to provide that specific to the wireless community as well. So CWNEs can opt in to mentor other people. And what that means is not that their time will have to be consumed in a massive way, but that they'll just receive a message if someone asks a question, and they can give their response to that if they desire to at that time, if they've got the time to do so. So a lot of exciting things, and there'll be more details about that coming out as it goes live. And in fact, when it goes live at the first of the year, I will probably do a webinar giving an overview of the interface and the system and how it all works. So those were some exciting updates that CWNP had. Now, let's take a look at some technical recap. One more exciting announcement I completely forgot. This was the slide that I used to have a little bit of fun. We brought Robert Boardman onto the stage, and he thought he was helping me throw out t-shirts. So I got him down to an area where he couldn't see what was on the screen. And then, of course, we put this slide up. So this is how we informed him that he was CWNE number 300, which was an exciting moment for us, an exciting moment for him, and for a lot of people. And so we've reached that 300 mark, and I expect we'll probably reach somewhere between 305 and 310 by the end of the year, based on the pool of CWNEs that are in the pipeline right now. So very exciting, big piece of news that came out there. And of course, the primary theme of the keynote is we will be CWNP. So I took people on a journey through the history and showed that CWNP was there being formed at the same time that the Wi-Fi Alliance was being formed, and that they've been there all along, that we are here and we will be here as we develop new certifications and continue to improve our processes and everything else that we do in order to serve the community as best as we can. Now then, technical highlights. So what I'm going to do is, as I said, go through each speaker and give you either a quote, a comment, a piece of information, something that they shared with us. As I do this, let me say that all of the video presentations from the conference will be on CWNP TV. We're editing them and processing them and going through all of that now, and they'll be showing up starting in January. So watch for those to go live on CWNP TV. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to YouTube, search for CWNP TV, all one word, and subscribe, and then of course you'll get notified as those videos get posted. So first of all, Ryan Woodings from MetaGeek gave us an important equation. Performance equals capabilities minus environment. So when you're looking at vendor literature, spec sheets, specification sheets, those kinds of things, they'll tell you the capabilities of an access point. And then you have to consider, in addition to that, the capabilities of your clients. But even when you know the capabilities of your access points and clients, you have to factor in the environment. So for example, we have this new terminology from the Wi-Fi lines, right? Wi-Fi 4, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6. And the reality is that your laptop that you buy in a few months may be a Wi-Fi 6 laptop. You may install a Wi-Fi 6 AP. But just because those capabilities are there does not mean you're going to get the peak performance that Wi-Fi 6 can give. Wi-Fi 6 is not going to be Wi-Fi 6. What I mean by that is one stream Wi-Fi 6 is not the same as 2 stream or 3 stream or 4 stream, right? So the reality is just knowing it's Wi-Fi 6 just tells you that it has that 802.11ax physical layer. It doesn't really tell you that it has 2 streams or 3 streams or 4 streams or that extra information. And so the capabilities are more complex than Wi-Fi 4 through 6. It is going to also have to factor in those pieces of information, channel bandwidth, spatial streams, etc. And then on top of that, you've got the environment. So if you've got a higher noise floor than normal, say you've got a noise floor of neg 87 or neg 86, something like that, obviously that impacts it. So the key is to remember it's not just about capabilities when it comes to what you'll get out of your environment. And then Stephen Cooper shared with us some information about Wi-Fi calling, that it provides cellular calls without cell coverage. And he went through some of the details of how that works. So you want to make sure that you check out that presentation to see why that might be a beneficial thing in some scenarios. I know there are a lot of buildings, for example, that do not have good cellular access indoors, but if we have Wi-Fi calling enabled on our phones or with third-party tools through Android or something like that, then we can actually take advantage of placing a call and having the feeling that it's just a normal call from our cell phone, but it's actually going across Wi-Fi. Raul Dionisio talked about his road to CWNE, and a big thing that he suggested is to approach CWNE essays like they matter. And this brings to mind what I always say, and that is that CWNE essays and the application in general represents you to the CWNE board. So think of that application like it is your interview. If you're interviewing for a job, in this case, you're interviewing to become a CWNE, right? So think about how it presents you, because you want to present you in the best way possible. Gustavo Mastroianni talked about the fact that when you're doing a Wi-Fi design or deployment, that you need to partner with the customer, educate the customer to improve Wi-Fi design. And one of the big things he focused on was using analogies to help them understand what it is you're talking about, why you need to do things a certain way. In other words, talk to them on a level that they can understand and make sure there's comprehension there. Femi Sakal talked about presenting technical information, and particularly presenting information about Wi-Fi to your users and customers. And he suggested to use the SCIPAB model: situation, complication, implication, position, action, and benefit. So talk about the situation, the complications the customers are having, the implication of those complications, and then position a solution, recommend an action, and communicate the benefit. So by going through this model, it helps you to basically sell the solution to the customer. Even if you're not asking them to write you a check or process a payment, but you're trying to get them to buy into your solution, the model can be helpful. Devin Aiken talked about RF math and went into more in-depth than just tens and threes, but he also pointed out that different device types have ridiculously different receive sensitivity levels. And so when you're doing site surveys and things like that, you want to often design for that least capable device, right? But the challenge is that devices vary greatly. So you might have several devices that have really good receive sensitivity and can pick up the signal to where that they get a good, strong data rate. But other devices have a very low data rate because their receive sensitivity is simply not as good. So obviously a very important thing to keep in mind during design. David Kershaw talked about the fact that they have, at his place of employment, a very defined process to address rogue devices, and suggested that we do the same. The point is that there is a way not only to detect them, but to handle them and deal with them when you detect them. A lot of people think about, how am I going to identify rogue devices in my environment? Rogue APs, even rogue clients that may not be APs, or devices that have 802.11 chipsets in them and try to talk in the airtime, but do not actually join the BSS. So detecting these kinds of devices and then having a standard, consistent, repeated way that you deal with it is beneficial. David Coleman, of course, talked about 802.11ax, using PHY and MAC enhancements for better traffic management. So the big focus of the presentation was not just to say, here's what AX does, but why it's doing what it's doing. And that is enhancement. And hence it's called the high efficiency wireless physical layer. It's about being more efficient. Don't worry, we have another amendment already beginning to be developed that's going to be about giving us extreme high throughput. So that's coming down the road in a few more years as well. Brett Hill, very interesting presentation. He runs a kayak, a boat rental company, in Tennessee, and he talked about how does he get his Wi-Fi networking outdoors and using solar panels and picking the right solar panels and getting power to Wi-Fi devices. So very interesting presentation there. Blake Krone talked about security and Wi-Fi and that WPA3 provides good security enhancements even if the Wi-Fi Alliance doesn't require them. So a bit of my commentary here is that the Wi-Fi Alliance for certification of WPA3 is not necessarily requiring that all of the best features of WPA3 be supported for a device to get that certification. But if the vendors give us the features, both at the client and in the APs, we'll still be able to use them. And the hope is that without them being certified, we'll still see some of those best features of WPA3 being implemented. Bob Friday talked about AI, artificial intelligence, and said it requires a well-stocked data science toolbox. And he went through kind of the history of developing AI concepts in his organization and how they've had to evolve it and grow it, how that it's still not exactly where they want it to be, but that it's getting better all the time with all of the complex science behind the machine learning capabilities, the artificial intelligence, and so forth, that gives them the statistics and metrics summaries that help people to troubleshoot wireless networks and better analyze and work with them. Charles Ahiwe talked about the fact that many wireless networks are deployed as if they're wired solutions. In other words, they don't manage the projects in a different way. And they are very different projects. The reality is that Wi-Fi is not wireless. There are some controllable things related to wired connections that aren't controllable completely with Wi-Fi. And so we have to treat the projects different. There are extra stages we have to go through. You really only have to know where you're going to run cables for wired. You don't necessarily have to know the environment from the perspective of what's already in the air because the communications are locked within those cables. So Wi-Fi projects are different. They take more time to do right, to be quite frank. And so it's very, very important to understand the differences between a Wi-Fi project and a wired project. Moving on, Chuck Lukashevsky talked to us, very important and a highly popular presentation at the conference about the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi and where we're going with new frequency space. And some new news has come out about that space opening up even since the conference. The thing that I really caught here was one of his slides had the phrase on it, 5 gigahertz build out is effectively over. In other words, don't wait for more 5 gigahertz space. Understand we're going to be moving into 6 gigahertz, that new space is available to us and it is required. So this is a presentation you're definitely going to want to watch when it comes out to CWNP TV. Frank Vergeer talked about second and third coverage, and it can make or break a Wi-Fi deployment. So many times when we're designing wireless networks, we only think about first coverage. This is the AP that covers this area. This is the AP that covers this area, and so forth. But second and third coverage is what other APs are also providing coverage in that area, which can obviously make or break a wireless deployment. Christopher Muhammad talked about 75 billion IoT devices by 2025, and he talked about IoT and other factors in general as well. This is one of the things driving the CWIP certification, is making sure people understand how to integrate in the IoT world. So let's call it integration of things, right? So it's Internet of Things, we know, but the reality is we've got to figure out how those devices, how they impact our network, how they drive changes to the way that we think about wireless design and implementation, and how they impact Wi-Fi and how Wi-Fi impacts them. So all of that's very, very important. Ian Beyer talked about the fact that creativity is essential in Wi-Fi projects. He gave us a great example of a special mounting bracket that he did in a particular Wi-Fi deployment. So he created his own mounting methods to have the APs mounted properly, but also consistently and stably within the space. Very good information there. Ian Turrell said, proactivity is better than reactivity. And this is a big movement that's going forward. There's a lot of momentum toward proactive wireless LAN management. And so rather than just waiting till users complain that something's not working right, we have the monitoring systems in place that warn us that something's not working right, possibly even before we hear from any users. So we can be proactive in addressing those issues before they cause extreme problems for our users. Jason Hintersteiner talked a lot about backhaul. He wrote the chapter on wireless bridging and backhaul links and other things in the CWDP book, the new one that was just released this quarter. And he says, avoid mesh in performance critical applications. And I can't agree more. You can't really accomplish performance with mesh Wi-Fi like you can with wired Wi-Fi. And I know that probably sounds odd, but what I mean is, when we think of typical APs, there's a wire behind each AP, right? And we're not dealing with an extra higher latency wireless link through the mesh or something like that. So if you have a performance critical application, the old wired Wi-Fi is usually better than mesh Wi-Fi. Then we have Joel Crane from Ekahau saying packet capture is coming to Sidekick, and Jussi Kiviniemi, also from Ekahau, talking about Ekahau Site Survey 10, which will support OFDMA, BSS Coloring, and Legacy Client versus 11AX Client Impact. And that version is expected in Q1. So that was some good news from one of the vendors there at the conference as well. Peter McKenzie talked about, I'll try to say it, I believe it was XP Analysis was the name. And he said that used correctly, a protocol analyzer is your troubleshooting and analysis magic wand. But the emphasis was used correctly, because when you use a protocol analyzer correctly, you get great information from it. When you don't really understand what you're looking at, or maybe you don't understand some quirks of your specific protocol analyzer, you might make wrong assumptions. And so that obviously is key. Scott Lester said, future networks must be flexible, cost-efficient, intelligent, and easy to administer. And this is certainly becoming more and more true. Think about one of the stats we had previously. 75 billion IoT devices. A lot of those will be on Wi-Fi. We'd like to think, the odd little devices are going to stay at home, but they're not. They're going to come into the enterprise space, and there will be uses for them in the enterprise space. Just like everything else, starts in the consumer market quite often and then moves into enterprise as we figure out use for them. Well, if you have, instead of when you've got 500 people at a campus having to deal with between 1,000 and 1,500 devices, now you've got 500 people on a campus and you have to deal with between 2,500 and 5,000 devices in that same campus. You need easy administration. You need intelligence built into the wireless infrastructure management solutions. It needs to be cost efficient. It needs to be flexible. All these things have to be there. I think Scott is spot on in suggesting this for the future. Robert Bartz gave a presentation on Friday morning. The wired side of wireless is just as important, and it does get overlooked a lot. It will be something that's also covered in CWIP most likely. And then we have three more. Perry Carell talked about 2018. He said it was the most transformative year for Wi-Fi since its inception. And he was dealing with the fact that AX is coming on the scene, though it wasn't ratified yet at the conference, right? But yet we're seeing devices. We have WPA3. These two things alone make it a very transformative year. And Wi-Fi going forward is going to be a very different beast. Not only that, the frequency space opening up as we start to see chipsets support it. A whole new world of Wi-Fi is going forward into the next 5 and 6 years. Mark Williams talked about power save features, and the thing that you walk away from his presentation realizing is that understanding power save features of client devices is no simple task. There are many different types of power saving that I might use. You have to understand what they're using to make sure that you're supporting it well within your environment. And finally, the final presentation before closing remarks was Keith Parsons. And he said, if you don't know how Wi-Fi works or how 802.11 works, or even basic best practices, Wi-Fi still works. In other words, you can plug in a bunch of APs and Wi-Fi is there. And the result is, because of that, it leads to poor design. A lot of Wi-Fi networks are implemented by network professionals that know wired networking, but they don't really know Wi-Fi. And because of that, there's poor design, and then there's poor performance. And then people say, well, apparently Wi-Fi is just not good. Well, the thing to keep in mind is that poorly designed Wi-Fi can often be perceived as not good. But well-designed Wi-Fi can be perceived as exceptional, phenomenal, wonderful. So solid design is key to solid Wi-Fi networks. All right, so what's next? Well, Wi-Fi Trek is coming in 2019 to Nashville, Tennessee. So we announced this in the closing remarks at the conference, and it will be in September this time, not October, September of 2019. And of course, you'll be able to see announcements coming out and so forth from our website in the first quarter of the year as we launch registration and so forth for next year's conference. So just know now, Nashville, Tennessee, September 2019 is going to be the next Wi-Fi Trek. Also, the CWSP and CWIP JTAs will be in quarter one of 2019. They're currently scheduled for the last week of January. We'll start to see learning resources come available in August of 2019, so study guides, e-learning, practice tests, and so forth. And the exams will be available on September 1 of 2019. So the new version of SP and IP will be there at that time. Now keep in mind that, as I said, I will be releasing the objectives in quarter one. So the JTA will be done at the end of January. Then throughout the month of February, we'll be building the objectives out, having those reviewed by CWNEs all over the planet. Once those are reviewed, edited, vetted, finalized, then those objectives will be made available on the website in March. So somewhere probably mid-March within still quarter one of 2019. So watch for those to come out. And then, of course, throughout the summer next year, probably starting in April, actually, we'll begin to see webinars focusing on topics related to CWIP, topics that'll be new in CWSP, and we'll be having some good webinars to kind of get you started learning and thinking about those new certifications as they come along and we get closer to the time of their launch on September 1, 2019. Also, remember, as I said earlier, Wi-Fi Trek 2018 presentations will be available on CWNP TV in January.